Welcome back to the Ignite podcast. I'm your host, Brian Bell. Today we have Patrick Murphy on the show, the founder of Maket. Patrick, why don't you walk us through what Maket is and how you came up with that idea and where it's going now?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brian. Really super happy to be part of the show. As you mentioned, co-founder and CEO of Maket. Maket, we started the company in 2019. My co-founder is an architectural technologist by trade, an architect. We really started the company with the vision of being able to democratize architectural planning and design using AI at that point, but it was then quickly came into being generative AI, really to be able to simplify the home building and renovation process using generative tools. And we've been doing that ever since. So we're on the generative AI wave much before a lot of the generative AI things that we see here. So really excited to be part of the field.
Yeah, so walk us through the inception. How'd you get this idea? What's the background?
Yeah, so my co-founder, as I mentioned, had an architectural business for the past 8 years, and really was using tools like CAD and Rhino, sort of legacy tools that were hard to use and hard to quickly do iterations on. So we really had the idea of how do we use generative AI to be able to create new architectural plans quickly, be able to create renderings quickly, really be able to get from idea to schematic design, conceptual designs, and further in the architectural process using software. We went through many iterations of the platform of being a real-time visualization platform, but then GPU was super expensive because it was before generative AI. So we had to pivot from that point. We've looked at online home sales as well during the boom of COVID, but really landed on the creation of new schematic floor plans. And as I was mentioning off air, we're really heading in an era that's really focused on short, medium term, end-to-end home renovation using generative AI software. And then our big vision is be able to combine autonomous robotics and generative AI to be able to 3D print homes 100% on demand. So that's the moonshot that we're heading for.
Wow, so you could literally go to your website, interact with an AI. It would generate the floor plans for your
Yeah,
home, and then robots would go out and build that house for you automatically.
exactly.
That's kind
Yeah,
of the vision.
exactly.
That's a
Yes, the
grand vision.
vision. It's a big vision. When VCs
Yeah.
often ask, what's $1 trillion business? That really is $1 trillion business. We see, we need to build, upwards of 40,000 new homes on a daily basis by 2030 to be able to reach,
Is that just
the
in Canada
quota.
or Canada and the
But
US?
that's globally. So that's globally
Oh, okay.
being
Yeah.
able to build that many homes. And really, the way that we build homes right now is a complete. It's stuck 50 years ago, right? So we really need to think about new ways of building, but then also how do we design new homes in a quick and iterative fashion. So that's really what the vision that we have is house more people more effectively by using those technologies. And the short, medium term is obviously passing by renovation because there's a lot of different needs there. I bought a home in August of this year, and I'm living my first-hand pain of being able to, hey, how can I use my software to renovate my space to really be able to maximize what that looks like? So short, medium term renovation and long term new build focus.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you said 40,000 per year?
Yeah. So the
Wow.
global housing shortage is 40,000. No, sorry, 40,000 daily that we're going to need to build. So it's
Wow.
by 2030. Like we need to build billions and billions of new homes.
Jeez.
Obviously, we've seen a lot of like companies like Icon and Mighty Builds and whatnot that are doing super good work on the 3D printing side. What we're seeing though is a lack of the front end generative capabilities to be able to do an end to end process. We're actually collaborating with the architecture firm here in Montreal to be able to create the first AI generated house in Montreal. So like we're actually putting
Mm.
this into practice, which is super exciting for us. But obviously, with generative technology, it's we need to fine tune it, we need to refine it, make it vertical specific, and then there are some things that obviously humans, the human needs to do. But yeah, that's the grand vision is being able to house more people, more effectively by combining those things together.
That's amazing. So talk us
Yeah,
through, startups are full of pivots, right? And you're 4 or 5 years into this journey.
yeah,
Uh, talk us through some of these make it pivots thus
yeah.
far.
Yeah, so when we started the company, really was focused a little bit more on visualization and design because of my co-founder's experience using these softwares. Really as I mentioned, didn't have a way to be able to show his customers quickly what their house was going to look like from a B2C perspective. So always had an eye on what the B2C would like and sort of what the end consumer would like, but obviously always with the architect's angle. So we first started a platform to be able to visualize what, say, your materials could look like, interior, exterior, using a 3D game engine, Unreal Engine, that we would then put on the web, and it would use something called pixel streaming to be able to see what it would look like. But the bandwidth that it would take is crazy. You know, it's server cost at scale. It just didn't work for a SaaS-based company. So we went down that path a little bit, and one of the things that we learned a lot is we spent fair amount of money creating an MVP and not putting it in the market and getting feedback from it. But I have to shout out my previous employer, Third Bridge, who they were the first software development company that worked with us to create the MVP. So shot some business their way. But what we saw was really that it could work on an individual basis, but the server costs were just too expensive. So that really led us to say, like, hey, the business from a SaaS perspective is not viable here. We have to pivot. That really led us to pivoting into, hey, how can we create a platform to be able to do home sales and sort of home acquisition 100% online? Because a lot of things were happening online because of COVID. And then what we realized through that is that there was a lot of competitors within the market that served it pretty well. Zillow is doing some things on that side of things. That's one of the major ones, Redfin, et cetera. And the market wasn't ready for it. Like, before generative capabilities, like buying a house 100% online, it's something that it's not the easiest transaction to do without seeing it. So that really led us to then getting into saying, hey, how do we create a tool to be able to fit into the architectural process better? That was really from the first conversations that we had with Mattamy Homes. So Mattamy Homes are the largest home builder in Canada. They had about 40 years of data, and they said, hey, what can we do to leverage this data and create an algorithm that generates new architectural plans based on our input data? And we are also collaborating with the largest floor plan provider in Quebec. So we actually amassed a data set of 60,000 plans, labeled those, and then really started down the algorithmic path of being able to create our own model to be able to generate new architectural plans. And this is really before the days of Stable Diffusion, before the days
right.
of, it was GPT-3. Like, it was pretty early in the process.
How are you guys hacking that together before some of these diffusion models came along?
Yeah. So we used GANs at the first started, so generative adversarial network.
Yeah.
But it was generating, floor plans that looked like an abstract piece of art. Right? It really looked like, boxes and whatnot, but it didn't understand adjacency, didn't understand room sizes, circulation.
Like an Escher drawing.
Exactly. It was very so it was interesting because there was clearly a need in the market for what we were creating, but the technology was still very, 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 early. And even with these diffusion models that came out, Stable Diffusion, et cetera, it still didn't understand the notion of spaces and architectural constraints. So it's been really an interesting way to create competitive moat around the company, but also, showing the limitations of what the large models are doing, right? So we've had to do a lot of applied research. We're collaborating with the Miele Institute, which is founded by Yoshua Bengio. Yoshua Bengio is like one of the godfathers of AI. So we collaborate a lot with his research partners and really going deeper in the algorithm that we've created. But it's been an interesting journey where a lot of applied research that we've had to do and not just a nice little wrapper on top of a model that's been built by somebody else.
That's amazing. And what struck me about you guys when I met you is not only were you kind of hitting the market at the right time, because we got in touch in, I think, 2021. So these Stable Diffusion models were coming on the scene, and they were getting much stronger. But what struck me about you was your growth-oriented hacking nature. So maybe tell the audience a little bit about growth hacker Patrick. And how you approach growth.
Yeah, so it's really interesting because I come from the paid marketing side of things. Like I've worked I helped grow an agency and did paid customer marketing through Facebook, through Instagram, through different channels. So really that was my bread and butter. I always had it as a vision. It's like, okay, we're gonna do customer acquisition through paid marketing. It's gonna be like a classic approach of something that I'm good at. Fast forward to now, all of our growth almost has been organic directly. So it really flipped it on its head. That's always funny about life, right? But that's what we first aimed to do, is really targeted advertisements towards like architects, interior designers, etc. But what we found, especially starting this year, was a really, really strong organic growth, and that continues to be, over 30,000 users month over month that come on the platform, almost a quarter of a million users that have come to the platform pretty much organically. So a lot of it has been taking a growth mindset, though, of being able to ship things quickly and be able to get rapid customer feedback. And we're fortunate enough to be able to have that volume to be able to test things basically in real time. So that's been super, super interesting. But obviously trying to find ways to factor back in paid marketing to be able to accelerate some of the growth that we're already seeing, which is already quite impressive.
Yeah, I would imagine you can put some viral loops in. If you have a consumer who generates a
Yeah,
floor plan, they share it to Instagram
absolutely.
and then it's like
Absolutely.
made with Maket, and go check it
Yeah.
out. Here's the link. And
Yeah, exactly. So what we're going to be focusing on next year from a product perspective, as I mentioned, the end-to-end process, we're taking a look at sort of large chunks of what the customer journey looks like from like a design inspire side of things, being able to plan out what their project looks like, then being able to connect with professionals, so like architects, interior designers, real estate agents, financing, etc., and then being able to finance their entire project. So we're talking about like an end-to-end, but one of the really important pieces and one of the interesting side of things, being able to collect the amount of data that we have, is we really being able to see what type of things that people are generating in the
yeah,
community and being able to share that and really create a community aspect. That's something we're going to be leaning in more into in 2024. Like as you mentioned, when somebody generates a floor plan and a rendering of what a house could look like or what the reno could look like in India, for example, then somebody in North America that can see it, or the UAE. So we have really global presence across the platform.
yeah.
So breaking down the design barriers is
Almost
something
like a
that we're,
new generation of house, right? Where
yeah,
it's like a picture of
exactly.
this, and you could buy this little couch, you could buy that artwork,
Exactly,
and
exactly.
but
They'll also be able to do
AI generated.
transactions. Exactly, AI
Yeah,
generated. They'll be able to really say, hey, this is my space. This is the architectural inspiration I have from House or Pinterest. This is the furniture that would, this is my budget. This is what it looks like. And then be able to do all the process of buying that furniture, being able to complete the renos, et cetera, connecting with the people that they need to connect with. So it's really interesting of being able to capture really the homeowner and be able to have that massive amount of data set and be that company that really knows the homeowner super, super well and that has the data to be able to say like what they're looking at, et cetera. So in
yeah,
terms of lead scoring, et cetera, you're thinking about, the future of what that looks like. Shooting that lead over to an architect or interior designer, the thumbtacks and TaskRabbit, et cetera, right now, they just sell the lead and you don't really know if it's qualified. Now we're really going to be able to say, this person's been engaged, they've generated these things, this is what they want to do, this is their budget. Now it's just time to close the sale, right? So it's really, really a collaboration between AI and human to be able to really accelerate efficiency within the different processes. Yeah, we're excited.
yeah. That's great. So I love this vision of it's like consumer powered AI generated architecture, floor
Yeah,
spaces, diagrams, and
yeah.
interior design as well.
Yeah, interior design as well. So what we're thinking is from our future and how we see it is really being able to provide an experience that's at low cost or free to the end consumer, so they can have a lot of engagement on the platform. They can explore the ideas that they need to explore using the generative tools, and then we're the model that we're how we're going to make money, right, is a B2B2C approach. We're taking a look at sort of a marketplace perspective, a lead generation perspective, being able to bring these leads to the professionals they need to connect with. There's a financing component to it as well. And professionals like architects, interior designers, real estate agents, they can use it with their customers. So it's really being able to have really accessibility on the platform and engagement on the platform is something that we're taking a look at, because all of that data is really good to understand the end consumer, really what they want as a homeowner. And with a lot of the tools that we have right now, it's not you can't take the data that you're seeing in Pinterest, for example, or in House, and then be able to package that up and send that to an architect that they can connect with, right? There's a disconnect right now between generative tools, some traditional tools that we have like House, Pinterest, etc., CAD, those types of more like heavy software, and really being able to create a seamless experience. So that's really what we want to bring to market.
Yeah, this is interesting. You think about the evolution of the web, right?
Yeah,
You have web 1.0, right? Which is okay.
yeah,
I go to a website, I consume information like it's like in a magazine or
yeah,
something.
yeah.
And then 2.0, I can put some data into the web, store data
Mm-hmm,
there, retrieve it, kind of collaborate on it. Um,
mm-hmm.
And then you have this like third iteration of the web that's happening right now that we're living through, which is this generative web. You
Yeah.
might call it Web 3.0, you might call it
Yeah.
generative web, but it's,
Yeah.
it's like basically this new paradigm where the user is the creator,
Yeah. Yeah,
you
I
know?
find it so interesting. Yeah, I find it so interesting, and I think that it can bring. It's interesting how people are reacting, right? It can bring either a lot of fear into somebody and say, "Oh, I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose creative agency. I'm gonna have to go do something else." You see it a lot with graphic designers. You see it with architects. You see it with interior designers. But I think what's going to happen is that we're going to really elevate professionals into a higher role from doer to really consultant, critical thinker, and really a specialist, right? Where we're taking a look at things that are generated by AI by the end consumer saying, hey, this is the plan that I generated. This is the budget that I have. This is all the ideas that I've explored. This is where I want to build. I bought all the things I need to buy. And then it's really going to accelerate the process, right? And ultimately, what's really, I think, really interesting about this is we're going to be able to solve bigger problems, right? It's like we need to build
Yeah.
a massive amount of homes. We need to renovate the existing spaces we have. We need to retrofit the existing spaces we have. How do we get from I have an idea to something that's actionable in a quick fashion? That's what generative AI unlocks, which is super, super exciting. But there's going to be that moment of transition where I think people are still a little bit afraid.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I mean, if you pull up the stats on this, I mean, it does disrupt jobs
Yeah,
but creates new ones.
correct.
And
Exactly.
you look at something like the journalist.
Yeah,
I think Web 2.0 definitely disrupted the journalist job, right? There were,
yeah,
I think, fewer jobs to go around, but then a bunch more people made jobs having Substacks and were
yeah,
bloggers. And so on the net, it
exactly.
actually created more jobs, but there was this
Yeah.
disruption where you're like, oh no, the poor journalist. But then you have this
Mm.
long tail of hundreds of thousands of people around the world making a
Hmm.
living writing
Yeah,
because, yeah,
and it's super interesting, when you see the rise of some of the indie developers who've been using generative tools to be able to build businesses that are generating 250, 500,000, $1 million per year, where it's one developer and an
yeah,
AI agent. I think that we're going to be seeing a lot more of that. And then it's a more of a larger philosophical discussion of saying software investing, where is this going, building massive teams, raising massive amounts of capital to be seen sort of where that's going, because I think that there's going to be more and more a commoditization of software development and sort of software deployment as a whole. But what I think it allows us to do is coming back to focusing on large problems. Like, I think that we're not going to be focusing on like sort of like SDR tasks and stuff like that and building platforms that are able to do that more effectively. I really hope that we can do drug discovery, which we're already doing. Valence
right.
discovery that just recently sold a perfect example of that.
What was it? What was
Or
this?
building Valence Discovery. So they did drug discovery using AI and generative AI. So they joined Recursion most recently. I know the founders quite well, and
Oh,
it was really interesting. They were one of the early companies of using AI to be able to do drug discovery, and really like there's big foundational
yeah.
problems that we need to fix as a society. Now we're going to be able to do it. Before generative AI, it's classical software engineering. You have to piece a lot of things together, and then things get siloed. Generative is really being able to solve big problems is what's going to be super interesting. So yeah, it's
It's kind of
definitely
the
changing
empowerment
the
of the
way
long
people work
tail,
right now.
right? It's kind of like
Yep.
this empowerment. You kind of look at the history of software development, especially over the last 40 years. You could almost argue economically that software leveraged the skills of the elites,
Mm-hmm.
the most highly educated people in society.
Yep.
And you could almost make a case that generative AI will now leverage the imaginative skills of
Yep.
a niche
Yep.
out there, right? Which is really
Yeah.
exciting.
Absolutely. And when you take a look at, for example, I have a creative background. I was a graphic designer and, my previous, in my young years, I've always had an artistic, flow to what I've done. I think it's always been hard if you're not a good person, a person who's able to draw effectively, or you're not able to express yourself effectively using the tools that you have because, for example, you can't, draw well. Same thing with coding, right? There's going to be a lot of ways that people say, hey, I have this idea. I want to get out of my head. I want to get it into a product. We're seeing companies like TL Draw where you can go basically, it's like a Figma board that's open source, but you can turn it basically mock-ups into a UI UX. Then you're seeing some automated code solutions. It's going to be really interesting to see the business ideas that come out of this with the democratization process, combining that with really interesting communities and network effects. Like there's a massive amount of wealth creation that's going to happen. So I think the things that are going to remain are really solving huge issues. And then you also need to have network effects. Like that's another thing that's going to be, I think, remain as well. It's like if you have an audience to talk to, you have a massive amount of users or user base, you have that data, it'll make it easier to be able to deploy those things. But even there, you might be able to create, a GPT agent that finds you exactly the people
Yeah.
who want to purchase what you're building, right?
Yeah. And existentially, I've been thinking about the startup and VC ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
5-10 years from now, do I even have a job? Do you even have a job? Right? Because if
Good point.
generative AI is sufficiently powerful, anybody can
Yep.
talk to a PhD level assistant in any domain and create anything they want.
Yeah.
So why do
Yeah.
they need the middlemen? Are we just middlemen? Or like
And
are
I don't,
founders and VCs just the middlemen for creation, where we kind of like we try to discover the problems and build something and solve it for a profit? We're basically organizing capital resource. We're capitalists, right? We're organizing these
yeah.
resources that maybe that doesn't need to even happen in the future.
That's a good point. Like that's something that I always, and I don't even know if it's going to be 5 or 10 years, right? We're already talking about
Yeah,
what AGI could look like, right? With Gemini that's coming out, and there's
right.
GPT-4, and then it's like Q Star,
Multimodal from
all
the beginning, can generate
exactly,
anything on the fly.
exactly.
And
And now
these
we're
things will
seeing
just get twice as powerful. And they've been getting like 10x more powerful every year because the model
it's
architectures
crazy.
aren't doubling like Moore's law. They're
Yeah,
10xing in complexity.
yeah, yeah. And what I find
And so
really
like, do we even
interesting
exist in the future?
Yeah, what I find really interesting in like say 2024, I think is the year that AI goes vertical. So I think it's been a lot horizontal this
Mm,
last year, and a lot of VCs are really
right.
interested in saying, how does it go vertical? I think it's going to start with easy use cases where it's sales, marketing, etc. Which I honestly think that those tools sometimes it seems like it's a little bit of
Functional
a
verticalization is what you might call that. Yeah.
functional
Let's attack
verticalization.
sales. Let's attack marketing. Blah blah blah. Then you start kind of getting
Exactly,
into industry verticalization. Okay, we're going to tackle sales
exactly,
for this vertical. Um,
exactly,
Yeah, and
exactly.
that's how like software like that's the history of software, right? It goes vertical and
Yeah,
then it goes horizontal, and it goes vertical.
yeah,
It's like James
yeah,
Barksdale is like you bundle and then you
yeah,
unbundle, you bundle,
yeah,
and so it kind of goes in this cycle. Like the generative AI, to your point, is like creating this horizontal platform that can generally do everything. Then
yeah,
along comes a bunch of entrepreneurs and VCs like us
yeah,
that go fund a bunch of vertical use cases on top of
yeah.
this new paradigm. But like if you
Hmm.
keep following this to the end, it's kind of like at some point these generative agents get so good. You
Yeah.
can spin up thousands, if not millions, of them to do any kind of task or creativity. And
Yeah,
so like maybe venture capital and startup founders as it exists today look completely different in 10 years.
I think they do. I don't even think that there's a question of if they do. Even taking a look at sort of what the IPO market could look like, the traditional venture financing, ecosystem can look like. That's why I always try to retain when we're building our business. What does the world look like in 10 years, and what's the core big problem that we're trying to solve? If I live in a world in 10 years where we've built software using autonomous agents that are able to go from I have an idea to I can 3D print my house within the same day or within 2 days, then I'll be happy because I
Wow.
will have housed more people. Whatever the economic,
Yeah.
business side of things look like, or I can have a robot that's renovating my kitchen for a fraction of the cost, or we can be building more in a more sustainable fashion. Like it comes back to saying maybe this is the Canadian socialist in me a little bit, but I also have some capitalist because I'm 50% American. But it's
Yeah, me
really
too.
the
You and I
combination.
both.
It's
I was
really the
born I was
combination of
born in the States, but my mom's Canadian, so like I definitely have
there
a
you
little
go,
bit of that,
exactly.
Canadian influence.
But it's always like, how do we fix these major problems? And I was actually sitting with a group of Canadian sub ministers over the last few weeks where I said, hey, we're talking about the housing problem, the housing crisis here. We're not talking about how generative AI can fix this problem. And since that conversation, there's really a lot more interest around it. How did Gen AI fix the housing crisis? because we're going to have to stop thinking in terms of binary of software that's developed to do X will generate X amount of money, will go public, etc. It's how does this software that we're developing allow us to fix huge problems, climate, housing, autonomous driving, etc. Those types of things, biotech, and how do we cure cancer using AI, right? All these different things, we need to be funding companies that go towards that versus, in my opinion, building a more effective sales tool, right? I really believe that we're going to be stepping into an era that we're using software to really, really hit some of these major issues out of the park. And it's going to be an interesting society we live in by 2030. Like, it's going to look radically different.
Oh yeah, it's a very exciting time to be alive. And like I bet if you search some of the books behind me, you'll find a lot of stuff. Machine platform crowd, singularity is near. I mean, I've been reading and studying this stuff for basically since I was watching Star Trek in the 80s. And just thinking about these issues, but it came fast. All of a sudden here we are in about to be the mid 2020s, and it's all coming together in terms of what Kurzweil says, the GRIN technologies, genetics, robotics, information technology, nanotechnology, and you see some of the robotic stuff that's coming out right now. That's the other side of this vision that you have of 3D printing homes, or just having robots do the last mile, right? Where you can 3D print most of the home and then do the finishing touches with robots. I mean,
I'll give you a perfect example. Right?
Yeah,
I'm renovating my basement right now. Would have been nice to use some generative technology to be able to estimate the cost, etc. I mean, that's what we're building for me. Long term, I need to find somebody who's able to do my drywall and be able to really finish it properly. Finding that person already right now is complicated because thumbtack, etc. They don't necessarily have that available. Imagine in a world where an autonomous robot comes in, he's learned through different videos, etc., of how to do it and really how to do the sanding, etc.
PhD level drywaller.
PhD level drywall. I'm even thinking about haircutting. That's something that I've thought about for the last 10 years. It sounds crazy, but like a robot that's able to learn how to do a fade or how to cut hair, right? We're going to be living in a world where it doesn't sound like sci-fi anymore, where we're combining the robotic side of things with the vision side of things, and then also the generative AI side of things, where we're really combining all these different models together and saying, there's somebody now who can cut your hair within 2 minutes because they know exactly how to make a fade based on what you're doing, right? It's like we're thinking about completely different jobs, and then it will create an existential, crisis of people saying, well, if my identity is found in my job, then what's next, right? So you have to be diversified and sort of like what makes you, right?
What's exciting, I think, to that point is everybody will be unshackled from the 40-hour a week kind of like go to the office and punch the clock and create the TPS reports kind of job. I think everybody will now be free to create whatever they want to create for the world. Or just sit there and like be entertained. But like there'll be some of us that just want to create things. And the barriers to creation will be minimized to practically zero. And you'll be able to just talk to this super intelligent AI that's like your chief of staff, your head of design, your Johnny Ive, and you'll just be able to sit there and be Steve Jobs to Johnny Ive. And just be like, it'd be really cool, if like that car could fly, like how can we make that happen?
It's gonna be super interesting because like I think that that's why I think that creativity is at the heart of what you do. Because if somebody has a good design idea or a creative idea and they're able to operationalize that, it really can either create economic value or be able to really feed into creativity and really allow for more creativity. Like when I discovered Midjourney, I went on a binge. Like I was generating. It's just like I have never used a creative tool like that. I mean, I've used Photoshop before.
No, that was a sea change. When I first used it, I was like, this is incredible. I was putting my friends in weird situations in video games and stuff. I'd take their picture and I'd say like, all right, put them in as a Simpsons character. Like
it's crazy.
Playing Call of Duty or something. Like I just come up with like random things and just generate funny memes and stuff.
And it's funny because it really is like I think that we're gonna look back in 10 years and it's gonna be similar to say when we look back 50 years and we said, I can't believe that like these were the gas engine cars that we were driving. How polluted they were. can't believe that we were doing these things. I think it's going to be the same thing looking back and saying, now that we have the technology, I can't believe that we weren't, building a
Yeah.
fraction of a fraction of a fraction of what we actually built to have sustainable. It's going to
Yeah.
be it's completely game changer.
Well, I love that. I love that analogy because pace is accelerating, right? And so I think in 10 years, 20, 33, 34, we'll look
Mm-hmm.
back at today like we look back at like 73.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
like it'll be
I
like
think so.
pre-computer basically.
Yeah, yeah.
Practically like you're just like shuffling papers around an office. Like, like how do you do
Going to an
work?
office.
Yeah. You got paper spreadsheets, and you're kind of
Yeah.
calculating like with a manual
And, it,
calculator.
and it's interesting to see some of these technology trends, right? Where you see, AR and VR have been available for 10 years almost, right? If not more, right? And some of these technologies haven't taken off because the market just wasn't ready for them. And it's interesting to see how generative AI now it really is taking off, and almost a year day for day.
Yeah.
It's really when it took off, and it's really
It's like
integrated
every week.
popular. It's
It's
like
like
every
every
week,
week there's
right?
some new like I'm on YouTube at night just, sitting on the
Yeah,
couch watching
yeah,
all the latest AI, videos. Like look at this demo, look at
yeah,
that demo. And it's just like every week there's
yeah,
something new and better,
yeah,
and it's like
yeah. It's
it's
nuts.
exponential. It's not even doubling every year. Like I said, it's like order of magnitude. It's
Yeah, and
like
I think
doubling
it's
every
going to
month.
lead into taking that technology to democratize VR or AR, etc. Where now it's going to be like, well, if I was just like Web 1, 2, and 3, if I'm just consuming content, a video game using my VR headset, what about creating a new world? What about living in my existing space before I build it, right? So even adding on top of that layer,
Software
not
that
even
learns
thinking
from your usage of it, or to
exactly,
your point, like
exactly.
video games. Like I'm a big gamer, and having a video game where there's a construct. Like I just played Starfield. I just played through the main
Yeah,
campaign. It was really fun.
yeah.
But imagine like Starfield, but with generative AI, where everything is
Yeah.
generated based on how you interact with the game. And so
Oh,
like my
100%.
game is completely different from yours, and I can't
Yeah.
even talk to you about my game because maybe this character dies in my version, and you're like, no, that I was that character in my version, or
100%. And it's really interesting to see then the combination of, say, the physical world and the virtual world. If we live in an environment where 3D printing becomes super affordable and you can change your materials, or somehow it integrates sort of virtual materials, for example, and you're not putting brick anymore, but you're putting brick that can change colors or change different designs and whatnot. And one day you can have your house that looks like one thing on the exterior, and the next day you can have your house that looks like something else, or it changes with the environment, the
yeah,
temperature and whatnot. That's going to be like, I think that's going to the world that we're going to be living in, where we're saying, now we have this, for example, the material sciences side that's advanced well, where I put a special coat of paint on my walls, but now from a technology perspective, I can see what it looks like before I change it, and now I can have a paint that changes color, right? It's like, well,
yeah,
today my room's green, but tomorrow my room's going to be orange, right? I think that like that's going to
it'll be
happen as
that
well, which
easy.
is really cool. It'll
Yeah.
be that easy. Yeah.
Circling back to your Midjourney comment,
Yeah.
Renata left LinkedIn back in June
Yeah.
to take a sabbatical. And during the
Mm-hmm.
sabbatical, she's been writing children's books with the help of Midjourney.
Mm.
She's published
Oh,
two now.
fantastic. Wow.
She took our
That's
puppy,
awesome.
turned it into a unicorn, and now the puppy travels the world. It's like a children's book for
Yeah.
basically parents who are about to travel to a place and they want to
Yeah.
prime the kid for what's
Yeah.
to come. But she loves travel, and she loves
Yeah.
her family obviously and all that. So
Yeah.
it's just another example of somebody that was on the corporate ladder climb,
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
jumped off for a while, and is now creating things because AI
Yeah.
has lowered that barrier. There's still like this last mile thing. There's still some things to do that's
Yeah.
not 100% automated,
Mm-hmm.
but without Midjourney and Stable Diffusion, she wouldn't have gotten as far.
No, exactly. And like I've always had a fascination for interstellar travel, different, galaxies, etc. Like we're just like a tiny little speck when you think about it. People don't like to think about it because it causes existential questions. But
Yeah,
visualizing, hey, a planet that's light years away, what does that look like? And then, for example, or I just started a creative series that I started working on a little bit using Midjourney. We want to basically put somebody on Mars by the year
yeah,
2040, 2045, I think. It's like, what is that sort of Mars landing going to look like? What's the space gear going to look like? What are the vehicles going to look like? all these different things. And I think we're able to then fuel creativity of saying, great, we can actually make mock-ups now of what it can look like, and that vehicle can look in that way, or that spacesuit can look like in that way. So even when it comes to product design, combining different things together of saying, hey, a toothbrush doesn't have to look like this anymore, or a spaceship doesn't have to look like this anymore because we've been able to explore it. It's unbelievable what's honestly, it's really cool.
Yeah. I've been listening to the Elon Musk biography
Yeah. Yeah.
about the SpaceX
Yeah.
story. It's just amazing. You know, just
Yeah. It's
trying to
crazy.
create an interplanetary species, and the way
Yeah.
Elon is just driven by these
Yeah.
first principle visions of like, oh, okay, sustainable energy, you know, multiplanetary species, and the way it just drives the whole arc of his life towards that.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just working on
Yeah.
that. It's pretty amazing.
And he's a good example, I think, of, I think that I have some reservations about him, and I think that some
Yeah.
people do too. But I think that he is a good example though of fixing really big problems and thinking about not like, hey, what does the technology do right now? Where is the technology going and what can we fix? And I actually think that you know, the example of buying Twitter, for example, that might have been, well, now X might have been a mistake just because of fixing sort of short term technology issues and really more of a short term play versus a longer play that he's doing with Tesla or SpaceX, right? So it's interesting to see that play out in real time.
So do we think, you know, and I'm kind of posing the question for both of us, do we think that
Yeah.
we're entering post-capitalist society in the next 5 years or the next 50 years? Like, you know, because somebody's going to have to go put a bunch of labor inputs into building all these robots and information
Yeah.
technologies. Do we see a creative destruction where, yeah, there's lots of jobs eliminated, but there's lots of jobs created, and there's still this capital allocation kind of need, an entrepreneurial need for people to go build these platforms, verticalized platforms to create, or does generative AI just get so powerful where the agents can kind of do everything, and
Yeah.
all these software companies and capitalists and founders are unnecessary? When
I
does that
think it's
happen?
50 years. I do think
Yeah,
it's 50 years.
yeah,
Maybe not 5 versus 50, but it's maybe 15 years
yeah,
just because people's ingrained habits remain the same and they're super hard to
yeah. Look at
change.
the
When
internet,
they,
right? It took really
yeah,
15,
like
20 years for the internet to fully change how we
exactly.
do things, right?
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And it's interesting sometimes even when you coming back to the AR VR example, when you have the technology doesn't mean that people are going to change their way of doing things, right? So I think that probably, I'm 29 now. By the time that I'm 40 or into my 40s, probably will look very, very different. Into my 30s, I would say it's probably
thanks,
an
man. Making me feel
enhancement
old.
of verticals. So I haven't made jokes
uh,
with me under 30s, so it's okay. But
yeah.
but I think it's going to look
I
quite
just made the
different in
Forbes 40
30s.
over 40. No, I'm just joking. That doesn't exist, but
Actually good if you didn't make the Forbes list because a lot of those people are in a different location.
yeah,
We
isn't
got
that the joke that a lot of them end up like in prison or like convicted of fraud or something?
yeah, yeah, exactly,
It's like a very like it's a leading indicator almost.
exactly. It's like if you're on there, you're in trouble, right?
I just had one of my founders get on the Forbes 30 under. It's funny. Yeah, I hope she's not fraudulent.
Exactly. I don't think so.
Not my founder. Switching gears, I want to talk about the story where you were this couple of years ago where you're skiing and you break your leg.
Yeah,
Tell
not
tell
just
us what
it.
happened.
I
Like your femur snapped.
my femur snapped. So not doing
Oh,
things halfway and being a founder who goes always
oh,
goes all out. I decided to break the largest bone in January. So it happened in January of 2022. Sorry, yeah, 2022. Yeah, so very very recently. Um, so I was skiing. It was a cold night. It was minus 20 Celsius. Skiing a little bit recklessly, and actually, this is a shout out for taking care of your mental health. Wasn't in a good place mentally. Was very frustrated with COVID. Was
you're
sort
kind
of
of taking it
was
out on the slopes.
taking it out on the slopes
Yeah.
100%. I actually thought before what would happen if I would ski recklessly, and I found out what would happen if I ski
Oof.
recklessly. So I ended up in a ditch in between two trees and a rock. I broke my femur. I
Ah,
don't know how I fell, but that's how it happened. So
just going too
two
fast
major
into a
surgeries.
ditch, basically. Yeah.
too fast into a ditch, and I honestly could have died. And
Yeah.
that's something that like I share about myself, and it's you can clip it out if you want to, but my faith is a super important thing for me as a founder and for me who
Yeah.
I am as a person. And man, like since that, it's really changed how I view life. I see every single day as an opportunity
Yeah.
to live to the fullest, because probably, technically in real physical terms, I shouldn't be here.
Yeah.
So it really makes a big difference on how you live and what your purpose is.
There's
Yeah,
something about
crazy.
facing death just generally, right? Like I
It's
think
crazy.
in most faiths,
Yeah,
Buddhism especially, like I was really into Buddhism in my 20s,
yeah,
and you do these meditations on death, like
sure.
picturing every aspect of your death.
Yeah,
And it's very galvanizing for your life because you realize
yeah,
like you could die anytime, and like how are you going to live?
exactly. Yeah, I was I'm part of a group called Faith Driven Entrepreneurs, and I was giving a talk on what does your legacy look like, right? As an entrepreneur and a founder, you're always trying to balance spending time with your family, taking care of yourself, really living life to the fullest, but then also building a business and what you want to build. You see a lot of people who exit businesses but are completely miserable. They've got a bunch of money and really doesn't bring satisfaction. So I think it's important as a founder to say, I like what I'm doing. I'm providing true value. It's a really sort of interesting field that I'm in, but balancing that with saying like, hey, yeah, it could be my last day on earth, and how do I want to live that and what my legacy is. And it comes back to the fundamental principles of business and how I am as a person. I'm always what you see is what you get. I'm authentic, and that's it. I don't play games with people, right? That's really
Yeah,
how I am, right? It really makes you think, for sure. Yeah,
I love that. And there's been sort of like a anti-religiousness about Silicon Valley
yeah,
generally, I'd say.
yeah,
I think there was
yeah,
an SNL skit where, um, or maybe it was in Silicon Valley. It was like one of these
yeah,
shows. You know what
yeah,
I'm talking about? Where it was like, oh, he's Christian. I was like, oh,
yeah,
like, nobody wanted to
yeah.
talk to him, and
Yeah,
he
and
was
it's too
ostracized. And
bad, right? It's
yeah,
too bad because like the Christian view is it's like, man, if you take a look at Jesus and how he lived as a person, it's like,
yeah,
man, we should always be following the type of principles that he had. So there's a way to combine both, and I'm living proof of it.
yeah,
But it's interesting how sometimes it's anti-tech, and then you'll probably see actually that dichotomy between, say, people who think about just pure forms of intelligence, AGI, for example,
yeah,
versus people who have a faith-based background, and you'll see that play out
yeah.
in real time. Like,
I
yeah,
think what people hate about religion, what people don't
yeah,
like about it, and as somebody who
mm,
grew up religious, became kind of
mm-hmm,
atheist, and is now
mm-hmm,
in my 40s, kind of circled back towards spirituality, I'd
yeah,
say.
yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
do transcendental meditation. I'm kind of entering kind
mm-hmm,
of the blissful consciousness and all that stuff.
yeah, mm-hmm,
Um, I think somebody summed it up is like, I don't hate Jesus, I hate his fan club. And
mm,
I think further what people hate about it is the sales team. They don't hate Jesus, they hate his
mm,
sales team, right? Because like
mm,
you have these
yeah,
cold callers,
yeah,
yeah, and nobody
yeah,
likes a cold
yeah,
caller, right?
yeah.
It's like, hey,
We've,
you want to sell your property on blah blah blah? Like,
I
no, I
mean,
don't. Like, stop calling me.
we've turned church and Christianity to business. You see it in politics. You see it. You see these huge churches really
Yeah,
grow and become massive enterprises. Hillsong is an example, great example of that in Australia. And it comes down to like, hey, the fundamental principles of believing the message of Jesus. He died for our sins. He rose again. He lives in us. And being able to take out those social principles and being able to live that out
yeah,
daily is an individual is what's important. And what we've made Christianity has been a huge problem. And I get why people say that, right? It's like, and I think it comes back down to the fundamental principle of love. Love other people,
yeah.
treat other people with respect. That's it. That's what Jesus
That's all the
did. He
universal
loved
things.
sinners,
That's why I
right?
love kind of
Yeah.
studying multiple
Mm,
religions. Is that there's
mm-hmm,
commonalities. There's these
mm-hmm.
common things, like you said, about love and acceptance and forgiveness. And yeah, I think it's uh, I've become much more tolerant as I get older. Of
Yeah,
I
yeah.
became intolerant, and and then I was like, why am I intolerant of like religion? That's stupid. But let's switch
Yeah,
to a rapid fire
exactly.
round. We could talk about that
Yep,
forever. What's
for
the most
sure.
impactful book you've ever read?
Ooh, I do like 0 to 1, which was a good read
Mm,
about being able to ship quickly. I wonder how those principles are going to scale in a generative AI world where you're going to be able to do it a lot quicker. But yeah, the 0 to 1 was definitely a quick and easy read that I liked a lot. I also liked, I think it's Shoe Dog, so the founder
Oh yeah,
of Nike.
I'm gonna
It
listen to
was
that
super
next.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
I saw the
really good
movie.
book. And then if I could add a third one, the Theranos story was super good. Bad Blood
Oh,
was fantastic. Yeah, I like that.
I love biographies and autobiographies.
Yeah,
It's just like my favorite genre of book to listen to.
yeah, it was good.
I mean, I listened to it in the car with my kids. We were just at the mountain
Yeah,
yesterday, not breaking our femur,
yeah.
but um,
Good. Same, same.
it was fresh, like 6 inches of fresh powder. It was just amazing. We were just up in
Oh yeah.
Tahoe, like we're an hour and a half. I pick them up from school. I get out of school at 1 o'clock on Wednesdays. I just pick them up and go. I shoot straight up there, and then we're
That's
back for
good because
dinner.
you're a typical venture capitalist, right? Now all that you're missing is your Patagonia. But like
Oh, it's
you're
around the
checking
corner.
boxes.
I could. You want me to throw on my pad? So it's.
Hey, coming too hot. I got it. I got it. I
I'm
got
taking off next Friday. Yeah, exactly. I'm a standard VC. You know what's funny though about running your own thing, and you know this is like you're always working. So like I'll take a
all the
day
time.
off here and there, but
Always.
then I'll work all day Sunday. You know,
Always.
or I'll do, yeah. You're always kind of. It's not as hard.
Mentally always
I'm
thinking
a
about
founder just like you. It's just not as hard as what you're doing. You
it. Oh,
know,
it's hard. Yeah, raising money,
raising money's pretty hard.
LPs and like that's
Yeah,
tough. Yeah.
yeah. It's pretty tough. Let's talk about dinner guests. If you could have
Yeah.
dinner with any three people, dead or alive, who would they be?
Man, that's a great question. Well, I think I gave away my hand in the first portion of this. Jesus is definitely number one.
That would be
With
really
Jesus,
cool.
it would be,
I would like that.
amazing.
Yeah.
It would be amazing. Another one is I don't know if it counts as one or two. My dear grandmothers that went to be with the Lord this year, so I'd love to have dinner with them again. And
Yeah.
then from a business perspective, uh, so I need to throw one business in there. Although I don't really agree with his personality and how he was as a person, but Steve Jobs, I think it would be super interesting to hear
Yeah.
how he built Apple. Like I'd love to, yeah, it'd be great.
Yeah, that's amazing. What's a hidden talent that you have that most people don't know about?
Ooh, I can duck talk. So that's weird, but I was at Disney and I can duck talk and
All right,
I
let's
can
hear
duck talk to Donald Duck and you know, so it's
That's pretty good.
like
You ever pull that out when you're just like walking
I
around the
did.
office and stuff?
I did it to Donald Duck at Disney World this year, and he just like turned around and looked at me. He's like, "What?
And
What's happening?"
he couldn't even talk back like that.
Yeah, he couldn't talk back. Exactly. It's
Here comes the Disney managers to hire you. What's your guilty pleasure?
oh man, that's a good question. Right now it's working on my house. It's like
Mm.
renovating. I don't know if it's a guilty pleasure, but I spend too much time looking at my paint in my basement.
I remember that. Yeah, when we moved in, these bookshelves behind me were like 1998 IKEA pine wood, like that
Love
color,
it.
that like raw
Yeah,
pine, ugly,
yeah,
cheap, Kmart clearance
yeah,
rack
yeah,
shelf
yeah,
color.
yeah,
Yeah, and so the first thing we did was just like paint, and we'd have streaks of paint on different walls.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
because you go buy all the samples, and you're like, okay, that streak, and that. How does that look? How does that look? How does that look? Yeah,
That looks great. You did a great job. Looks good.
yeah, it looks nice. Podcast recommendation. You got a podcast you like?
Ooh, oh, I so many. There's like a lot that I like on the rapid fire information side of things. I like the daily. I
Mm.
like Today Explained to get sort of my news tidbits. On the, I mean, there's no Christian YouTuber, etc. But I like Ruslan KD. He has a good podcast.
Mm.
He's actually an entrepreneur in fitness, etc. So that's really interesting. Tim Ross, The Basement, also a super good podcast that I listen to. Those are my main ones, and I have some hockey ones as well. So very eclectic taste. So
Mm.
The Athletic puts out a good amount of podcasts as well.
Yeah,
So
I'm like a
that's what I
crazy
like.
Warriors fan. I'm like listening to the Draymond podcast and stuff. It's just,
Nice.
it's like I waste so much time on basketball. Like I cannot wait for Steph Curry to retire so I can just like
Yeah.
just hit the timeout here and just like
Yeah.
just not get
It's like
sucked
me in
in.
hockey.
Yeah,
Oh, it's like me in
it
hockey.
used to be the
But I do
Seahawks
like
20
some.
years ago.
I like some tech ones too. Hard Fork is a super good one as
Mm.
well. And I tried to listen to the All In podcast, but I can't. I don't like it. But I do like the Lex Friedman one though. It's good.
Those guys are two libertarian VC billionaire
It's
assholes
just
for you, or what?
I think so. Like Lex Friedman is like whenever I listen to that, my wife is like, "Can we turn it off?"
It's
It's like he's so
so
monotonous.
slow. You almost have to listen to Lex on like 2x. It's like, okay, and let's dig into Like I can't listen to anything on 1x. I wonder how
Yeah,
I probably talk at 1.5x. So I wonder how I
yeah, I
sound.
think you do.
Sometimes I'll go back and listen to my podcasts on 1.5x. I'm like, oh, that sounds like 2x because I'm a
It's
kind of a
super.
fast talker.
Yeah, yeah, true.
uh, if you had a time machine, where and when would you go?
Oh man, I want to give two answers.
Yeah,
I'd go back to like
yeah. You
just
have a
around
time machine.
Jesus' time.
You can go. Yeah, you
So
can have
Jesus'
three
time,
parts here.
I like I really would like that. Go to
Yeah,
ancient Rome, like that's something I
yeah.
really
Just
want
go
to do.
see the
Yeah,
crucifixion, the whole walking on water,
yeah,
all
yeah,
that stuff. Yeah.
yeah. All that stuff. That's like for sure. And then if I could fast forward like 1,000 years into the future, what would
Yeah. How
that's
would it
where I
change
would
your
go.
faith if you went back and you found out Jesus was actually a Buddhist monk? Like,
Ooh, that's a good question.
like, would you come back and be like, "Oh shit, that just rocked my faith. Now I need to go, go to, I need to go to India and like go on a
Well,
meditation
I
retreat or
mean,
something."
I think there's good historical precedent that it wasn't, but that's a good question. I've seen his tangible
He's like, "Oh yeah, you just sit and you say this mantra." You know,
hand in my life. I don't know.
Jesus cut us off. Jesus cut us off. You cut off there.
Oh, there you go. See, there you go. It's a
Yeah,
sign.
yeah. God came in and he just stopped the podcast. He's like, "Stop this blasphemy."
Yeah, the Holy Spirit works in mysterious
Yeah,
ways.
yeah,
It's insane.
exactly. No, there's this theory where it was on the History Channel where Jesus went
Yeah,
east and he studied all the Vedic, and
yeah,
Buddhist traditions, and then came back and kind of
yeah.
molded them with the Western religion. And
Oh, interesting.
because
Yeah,
he's
the
like, look
History
inside
Channel
of
is also interesting.
you, kind of
Yeah,
sit and be with God, and these are very like meditative practices. This was amazing. Thank you so much for coming on, Patrick. I love the conversation. We covered so many topics in an hour. Thanks again.